Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio warns that China could enforce its new Coast Guard law in the West Philippine Sea. Armed Forces Chief Cirilito Sobejana says that the new Chinese law allowing its Coast Guard to fire on foreign vessels is very alarming. Sobejana said that the Navy will increase its visibility in the West Philippine Sea, not to wage a war against Beijing, but to ensure the protection of Filipinos.
The foundation of the United Nations is that no country can use force, can fire on ships of other countries to settle a dispute. You must go to negotiation, mediation, and arbitration.
Yung pronouncement ng China na their Coast Guard can open fire to people intruding into their territory, it's very alarming po yun. I should say it's a very irresponsible statement dahil hindi naman tayo ang ating mga kababayan ay hindi naman pumunta sa lugar na yan, sa disputed area, para makikipagera, kundi naghahanap buhay.
The new Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines vows to respect human rights and the rule of law in fighting armed conflict and insurgency. Now, how will the AFP Chief also lead the military in defending the country from challenges to its sovereignty and in promoting progress and peace?
The Save Our Schools network, meanwhile, said 176 of their schools have been shut down by government on claims that they are training grounds for the communist movement. They condemned the most recent police raid on a school in Cebu that rounded up Lumad children and their teachers. The police insist this was to protect the children. What really happened, we discuss in this episode of The Chiefs.
And welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. With us, of course, tonight is Robbie Lampay of One News in the studio. And also joining us online is Ana Marie Paminton of the Philippine Star and Lucy Cruz Valdez, the head of News 5. Ladies and Robbie, good evening and happy midweek.
Happy midweek.
Evening, Robbie. Evening, Ed.
Okay.
Parang natawad yung good evening natin.
Good evening,
Ulitin natin,
Ed. Good evening,
students.
Robbie.
Wednesday na Wednesday, eh, talaga. It's the hump day. You should look forward already to Monday. I'm sorry, to Friday. Okay, so let's bring in our first guest for tonight. We are honored to have him with us. Our guest tonight is a certified war hero and awardee of the Medal of Valor when, as a captain in Basilan, he fought off the Abu Sayyaf in January 1995. And now in 2021, he's the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. We're talking, of course, about Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobejana, who joins us now. General Sobejana, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Chiefs.
Thank you, Ed, Ma'am Lucy at Ma'am Ami. Magandang gabi sa inyong tatlo at sa lahat na nakikinig nitong or nanood nitong programa po ninyo.
Yes, sir. And we're with Robbie Alampay, sir, of One News. Sir, we're tempted to call you a certified leftist kasi nga,
Kaliwete. Kaliwete na kayo.
Marami nakapansin kasi na those who don't know what you went through,
I think we should explain
and how you earned the Medal of Valor in Basilan.
Well, the use of his right arm. Not entirely, no, but he cannot salute with it a snappy,
the snappy salute with the right hand.
At least not as snappy as his left. Right?
General,
Sir, sample naman. Sample ng salute ng right hand.
Ayun. That's because of the damage caused by two bullets, diba? In January 1995 sa Isabela City sa Basilan.
Yes po. Actually, 5 gunshot wounds. Mayroon ako at yung dalawa po dito sa aking kanang balikat tumama, resulting to a major injury. At ito nga ay nagiging limited yung function ng aking kanang kamay. At pwede ko namang itaas, subalit tulad ng sinabi niyo po, hindi ko masaludo ng in a very snappy manner.
Yes, sir. Well, sir, I don't think anybody can take away what you earned in 1995, whether you have a right hand salute or not. But anyway, sir, since napag-usapan na natin yung pagka-leftist, let me segue na to the topic that I have in mind, the first topic. In the last few months, military officers have been actively tagging members and officers of leftist groups like, for example, Bayan Muna, Gabriela, and Apawis as fronts of the CPP, NPA, and as terrorist supporters, if not terrorists themselves, even without any designation from the Anti-Terror Council. Now, for clarity lamang po, from you as the head of the armed forces now, what exactly is your policy with regard to branding these members of the Makabayan bloc as NPA fronts and terrorists? Do you have any clear policy on this?
Well, ang advice ko from the very first day of my assumption, ang sabi ko sa mga kasamahan ko, officers and enlisted personnel alike, sabi ko, we have to just follow the rule of law and be deliberate in our actions. I have also reminded our talking heads, ang ating mga spokesperson, to release information that are factual, accurate, and based on evidence. And of course, at the lower level, meron din tayo mga spokesperson, yung mga major subordinate units natin and commanders. They are guided or being reminded by the security, accuracy, policy, and propriety role in issuing a statement. Itong SAP rule na sinasabi ko, this guides our designated talking heads to practice due diligence and restraint in performing their duty of informing the public on matters of peace and security.
Yes, sir.
General, if you don't...
Okay, right.
Robbie Alampay po, if you don't mind, I'd like to clarify what you mean by two terms. One is you said advice. What exactly does that mean? Does it stop short of an actual order, or in Ed's words, an actual policy? And then secondly, the matter of accountability, nabanggit nyo nga po, a few weeks ago, J2, the head of intelligence, was fired over the NTF-LCAC's posting of UP alumni that supposedly were allied with the NPA, and maling-mali po, fake news talaga. How far will you bring accountability? Because with NTF-LCAC in particular, they keep invoking a wide berth of a gray area, when a lot of people are clearly saying, no, you're taking liberties with really dangerous words.
Well, you made mention about advice, directive, guidance. It's a semantic thing. What I'm referring to is that's a directive that we should be deliberate, we should exercise due diligence, especially in issuing statements. Kasi the moment you made that statement, you cannot take it back. So damage has been done. But of course, we can easily admit of committing mistakes and say sorry, but then it would be better kung sa una pa lang, tinama na natin yung ating mga statements.
But I think, sir, I think what people are waiting for is a sanction at the very least against, your spokespersons who have involved innocent people and red tag them, and put their lives at risk in the process, if not their honor, no? We have not seen that, at least as far as, for example, Parlada is concerned.
Well, while we wanted to be deliberate in doing our job, we should also practice due process among people who violates regulations. Kasi hindi naman po pwedeng nailabas yung ganong dokumento, kagad-agad paparusahan mo. We have to exercise due process. And besides, meron tayong tinatawag na we should be able to understand the anatomy of anger. One stimulus does not merit 10 responses. So kailangan 9 should be added from 1 so that fair for everybody. So 9 represents the deliberate investigation, thorough investigation, and so on and so forth. Kasi itong pagkakamali na to ay hindi ginawa ng isang tao lamang. There are people involved here. So hindi ganon kadaling ituro kagad ang ating mga daliri doon sa taong porque siya yung pinaka-head, but there are other people in that department or section in our units and offices na involved. Kaya yun ang hinahalungkat natin lahat at in due time we will make it public kung ano talagang nangyayari. But what is important is inadmit na namin na there was an inaccuracy of the list being released. No less than J7, Brigadier or Major General Benedict Arevalo admitted his shortcomings.
So General, merong investigation ongoing. You know, yung counterinsurgency, it depends a lot on winning hearts and minds. And malaking bagay ang ginagawa dyan. No? Ang malaking role ng spokesperson, especially ngayon yung National Task Force and the local communist insurgency. Are you happy with the way the spokesperson is performing his duty? Kasi parang pinakamaraming reklamo sa kanya, kay General Antonio Parnade. Is it also part of the investigation that you're conducting?
Last week, or a week before last week, the Secretary of National Defense directed me and he even made it public, yung directive niya sa akin, na iimbestigahan si General Parlade. With that directive, I called the attention of the Provost Marshal, who is responsible in investigating individual members of the armed forces. And my instruction to him, considering that Lieutenant General Parlade is the designated spokesperson of the NTF-ELCAC, which is higher than the armed forces of the Philippines, we need to consult the NTF-ELCAC regarding that matter, particularly the Strategic Communication Committee. Kung ito bang sinasabi ni General Parlade ay may basbas ng naturang committee. So yun yung initial effort ng ating Provost Marshal. So since then, hindi pa siya nag-report sa akin on the progress of the investigation at marami rin tayong ginagawa. Hindi lang naman ito ang inatupag natin. Otherwise, pag nakatutok lang tayo dito sa mga bagay na to, hindi na natin magampanan ang mas mabigat na tungkulin natin na mapanatili ang kapayapaan at katahimikan.
General, and we do want to get to other things. Marami pa po kayong suliranin, but I hope you don't mind just one last question. Because pinag-uusapan ng red tagging and ang isang pinagdedebatihan is how can we even define red tagging? And can we even get to an agreement as to ano ba yung delikado dyan? I just wanted to hear from you, where does the directive for you to be accurate and to be mindful and to be careful, is it just coming out of concern for the reputation of the armed forces, or will you acknowledge that red tagging, however you define or understand it, does actually constitute a threat on the lives and liberty of people?
No less than Juma season, identified the organization that are part of or supportive to the New People's Army. I think it was made public. So, sila mismo ang nag-identify sa sarili nila. Now, itong nangyaring statement ng spokesperson ng NTF-ELCAC against Ma'am Tetchi Tupas, I called the attention of General Parlade, being a member of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, in fact, as commander of Southern Luzon Command. And I highlighted to him that in making statements, we should not violate existing laws, rules, and regulations, and must not put other people in an embarrassing and life-threatening situations. And we have to make sure that mayroon tayong pinanghahawakan. And I think the armed forces should also be informed kung what are these holdings. so that we can complement the statement of NTFL-CAC. Kasi mahirap yung hindi kami aware. And in fact, as part of our information operation, much as we wanted that our people will be actively involved in our peace and security effort, they should be empowered by way of letting them know on the security situation. Ibig sabihin, they should have the highest level of situational awareness so that they can also do their part and support our effort in a very effective manner. And red tagging is the term that the enemies coined. Sa kanila galing tong word na red tagging. To us, it is truth tagging of informing the people about who are cooperating with the CPP-NPA and information based on the revelations of the former rebels and so many documents that we have recovered. Remember that we had been doing our job for 50 years now, even before I entered military service. Na mayroon na tayong campaign against this group that had started way back in 1968.
General, ano po yung reaction ni General Parlade nung sinabihan niya, nung sinabihan niya sa akin, nag-usap niya siya?
Well, as a good soldier, sabi niya, yes sir, yes bo, magmista kami. Madali kaming mag-usap at while I respect him, he also respects me. So, ganun lang yun, it's a reciprocity. Basta ang sa akin, sabi ko, Bok, well, we are doing our job, we should, as we deliver the best services of our people, we should be able to protect the integrity of our organization. Remember, we have a very high trust rating. Yun dapat ang ating i-maintain. We should appear as the protector of the people rather than them feeling that we are their enemies. And doon sa mga sinasabi niya na, Bok, these are the revelations of the former rebels. This information came directly from them. So being part of that the CPP-NPA before, they know better than us. And I consider them as the best sources of information because they are insiders who are now, I should say, whistleblowers, exposing all the secrets of the underground movement. And I do believe that former rebels have spoken the truth.
Well, sir, in the end, sir, do you
Pero
consider...
sinabi ba ni General Parlade na may pagkakamali siya? Sinabi ba niya na may pagkakamali siya?
Well,
or
wala naman sigurong taong perfecto, no? Everybody, as human being, we make mistakes. Ang importante ay we draw lessons from the mistakes we have committed, learn from it, and do not repeat same mistake from being happening.
Yes, sir. But sir, in the end, do you consider these groups, itong Makabayan Bloc, do you consider these groups as enemies of the state, even though there's no designation yet by the Anti-Terror Council?
Well, I don't want to generalize, no? It was specifically mentioned by no less than Juma Sison. He identified these organizations. And of course, we rely our statement from the revelations of the former rebels.
Okay, but sir, setting Joma Sison's statement aside, how are you going after the red tagged people in the list? Are you viewing them as terrorists in the same way that you went after, for example, the Abu Sayyaf, in which you almost lost your right arm? I'm just wondering, as a soldier, how do you view the leftists? Are they, as far as you're concerned, are the communists terrorists in the same way that you identified Abu Sayyaf before as terrorists?
Well, we have already admitted in the first place that the list that was published was wrong. So from that mistake, we draw lessons, and I emphasize to our men and women in the armed forces of the Philippines to be very deliberate and exercise due diligence. Tulad ng sinabi ko, pagka nabitawan mo na yung salita at may nasaktan ka, hindi mo na mababawi yon. More so pag nagkakamali ka. And itong trabaho namin, we are in the profession of arms. And we are confronted with people who have firearms as well. So it's really very important to accurately identify the enemies of the state.
Yes.
So that if we kill them, we are sure that they are the enemies of the state.
General, what do you say to critics and observers and even analysts who say that the conduct of the military, NTF, CAC, and all of these fiascos the past weeks not only damaged government's effort to defend the anti-terror law, but actually provided evidence and proof of concept of why the anti-terror law is a dangerous proposition?
Well, anti-terror law was crafted and enacted into law para sa ganon we have more teeth to grind the enemy of the state. Nakikita kasi ng ating mga legislators na ito yung kulang natin. So they fill in those gaps being identified over time. So pinag-iisipan to ng mabuti. At ito'y ginawa hindi para sa organization, kundi para sa kapakanan ng ating mga kababayan. And of course, the review is, itong usaping yung anti-terror law is still under oral argument. So, let us not preempt, no? Wag na nating pangunahan. But I just wanted to emphasize na ang batas ay ginagawa para sa kapakanan ng ating mga mamamayan. Hindi ito ginawa para sa ganon na magiging o gagamitin ng mga sundalo at kapulisan para sa kasamaan. Kundi gagamitin ito para masupil natin ang tinatawag nating enemies of the state. Otherwise, if we are not or we will not do aggressive actions against these people, then ipamana pa natin to sa next generation, which I believe you do not want also.
General,
Sir.
I want to move to another raging issue involving the military. Kasi si Presidente, the Commander-in-Chief, wants to abrogate the Visiting Forces Agreement. At ang pinakamalaki epekto nun is on the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Ano po yung sentimiento ng AFP doon? Saka kayo, personally.
Well, I don't want to invoke my personal view. I am a soldier, a good follower. Our President is our Commander-in-Chief. I always respect his wisdom.
Pero ano po ang impact nun sa military kung sakaling ma-abrogate siya?
Well, as an organization, as an armed forces of the Philippines, we should be able to stand alone. Kasi if we are so dependent on other countries, hindi tayo, sinasabi natin we should be on top of the situation always. So it is just a matter of allocating what we have, optimizing the utilization of our resources to make things happen, to solve problems, and achieve long and lasting peace and progress. And BFA bears primarily on training with large number of troops. Hindi naman sila kasama sa operations actually natin. So, enhancement of our capability lang ang kanilang naipamigay dahil tayo naman mismo physically ang humaharap sa kalaban ng ating Estado.
But then if you bring into the picture China, and especially their new Coast Guard law, and especially the timing, all of this, I mean, that has got to be brought to bear on the VFA decision, right? Does that, in a way, influence your thoughts, at the very least, on the VFA decision? If you were asked at all, for example, by the president, isn't that badly needed at this time more than
Well,
ever?
BFA is just one. Meron pa tayong Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States. Wala pa namang pinag-usapan. Ang Mutual Defense Treaty remains. So, nandun pa rin yung ating relationship. BFA lang naman yung binanggit ng ating Pangulo. The Mutual Defense Treaty, as what I've said, remains. And it shall continue to function as long as wala tayong walang pagbabago sa usapan, no? Let's differentiate BFA from Mutual Defense Treaty. And in that treaty, it is explicitly cited that in times of aggression, our allies, the U.S. Armed Forces in particular, will be on our side.
Yes, but in the meantime, we're going to have to also make our presence felt, especially in the West Philippine Sea, while there's still no out-and-out aggression from China. How do you propose to actually also make a stand that that's ours, also to protect our resources there and our fishermen whose livelihood depends on it?
Last week, I gave a directive to Westcom, or the Philippine Navy, to deploy more naval assets in Westcom AOR and NOLCOM AOR, so that our people there are protected. And I emphasize that we do not go there to wage war against China. It is very clear that our intention is to protect our own people who are doing livelihood, itong mangingisda natin. We cannot afford that their families behind will be hungry because we deprive them from going fishing in that part of our country.
Sir, let me ask you about something that has bearing naman with professionalizing the armed forces of the Philippines. There are those kasi who say that that apparently in the last few years, the military appears to have become more and more politicized. Kasi for example, you would see a lot of pictures of officers, including high-ranking officers, displaying the Duterte fist bump. Which is anathema to a lot of militaries in many democracies. So let me ask you outright po, is this appropriate for men in uniform? Is it allowed or is it discouraged? Yung pag-display po ng fist bump.
Well, the armed forces is a political organization. We are appointed by the president, but I just want to be clear that we are non-partisan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But yeah, in making that display, kasi like I said nga, and you studied in the U.S., I think you're very familiar with their policies there in the U.S. as well. People in uniform are discouraged from displaying partisan politics, especially in uniform.
Yes, we are not doing partisan thing. We do not take sides in the political exercise. We during political exercises such as elections, we provide a democratic space and let democracy work.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. But in displaying, for example, political signs like a fist bump, whether it's a fist bump or an L sign, would it be, in your opinion, appropriate for a man in uniform?
Well, as what I've said, we are non-partisan.
Sir, you're going to be in position for only 6 months. What contribution do you think you'll be able to actually bring to the AFP in a matter of 6 months? Is that a challenge for you? I mean, 6 na buwan, sir. Sa tingin niyo po ba may magagawa po kayo na may maiiwan kayong legacy, kumbaga?
Well, time is of the essence, no? And I want to impress upon the listeners, the public in general, that we have been doing campaigns since 50 years ago. What I am doing right now is the continuation of that campaign. That's why when I make my first guidance after my assumption, ang sabi ko sa kanila, we have to think of a quick win or catch a plan. So that hopefully with the 6 months, in 6 months time, we are able to significantly improve the security situation in our country. So best effort lang talaga to. And yung campaign naman, continuous yan. Hindi yung pag-upo ko pa lang, I introduce another campaign. It's a continuation of the campaign of my predecessor and the predecessors of my predecessor. And besides, I want everybody to know that meron na tayong Armed Forces of the Philippines roadmap that guides us through.
General, I just want to follow up on yung question ni Lucci. I mean, because in fairness, it's not just to you. Parang it seems like for the past few chiefs of staff, that's always been a question to everyone. You only have a little less than a year. You only have 6 months, and so on. Kung kayo po ang tatanungin, because I know there are legislators who are contemplating that as well. Continuation is one thing. Continuity in leadership is another thing. What would you recommend to provide? Would you recommend that any kind of reform so that the chiefs of staffs, the leadership in the military could have a longer tenure and so on? Some people are discussing maybe raising the level of retirement and so on. Meron po ba kayong recommendation? And would you acknowledge that because kung maiksi ang time ng isang chief of staff, 6 months lang, it always becomes a recurring question.
Well, leadership is one important factor in our campaign. But I should say, regardless kung magpalit man from time to time, we are ensured of or assured of continuity of our actions. So again, I don't want to make any recommendation. I submit to the wisdom of our leadership. In the first place, they are voted by the people, so the trust and confidence on our president is very high. Otherwise, he did not win during that political race.
General, in the coming weeks, meron pang isang critical role na the AFP will play, no? Kasama kayo dun sa vaccination program, eh. At in the meantime, kasama din kayo sa i-vaccinate na priority, yung first batch daw na donasyon ng Sinovac from China. Ano po yung sentimiento dito ng mga, have you conducted any informal consultations with the military kung anong sentimiento nila about getting the vaccines, specifically the vaccines made in China?
Mayroon tayong ahensya sa ating pamahalaan that looks into the safety of the vaccines. If it is safe for human beings, the Food and Drug Authority. We should have trust and confidence in them. Once they say yes, it's safe, then being designated as an agency that looks into this matter, we have to listen to them.
Hindi ho ba kayo na-bother dun sa, halimbawa, yung sa PSG? Hindi naman ho dumaan sa regulatory process yun. And yet, binakunahan nga ho yung mga taga-PSG. I mean, for example, stuff like that. Doesn't that bother you? I know you're trained to be brave and to take it all on the chin, but first, there was a violation there.
Sabi ng FDA, smuggled daw.
Yeah, as far as some experts are concerned, those were smuggled, so there was a violation. And secondly, it didn't go through regulatory, and now they're being given compassionate use license dahil nga raw donation. What are your thoughts on that? Na kayong unang PSG ang unang sinalang?
Well, ang usaping yan medyo matagal na, no? We should move forward rather than keep on talking what has been discussed earlier. Pero I'm happy to report that among the ASPSG members, wala naman pong sumama yung pakiramdam. Sila naman po ay nasa magandang kalusugan. So I presume na yung in-inject sa kanila ay epektibo. And besides, they are part of their mission is to secure the president. So for them to effectively secure the president, dapat ma-secure din muna yung sarili nila, lalo na dito sa invisible enemy. And of course, yung desisyon na unahin yung members of the armed forces, nagpasya kami na only 25% lamang ang mauna dahil mayroon pang ibang sektor ng ating society na mas nangangailangan. So that 25% represents the frontliners natin. Kung saan sila yung nag-provide ng or gumagawa ng security support operations in protecting the areas for vaccination, the delivery of transport, cold storage, vaccination center, and the workforce. And they are also actively involved in medical support operations, we are providing military health workers in those who are actively involved in the vaccination. And besides, we also deploy forces for logistical support operations. So, yung support task group, cold chain management, kasama po tayo dyan. Aktibo po tayong nagpa-participate dyan.
General, you have our assurance that certainly as far as being frontliners, everybody appreciates our soldiers, our armed forces, and even for the PSG, we're happy and we completely understand why the PSG, as the protectors of the president, need to be inoculated. We're there. But balikan ko lang po, if you don't mind, because yesterday we were talking to officials of the FDA and the DOH, and they said they were ordered to investigate. They have the mandate to investigate on paano nakapasok yung first batch na ginamit sa PSG. And they said, actually quite explicitly, then these are their words, there's been stonewalling. They said, we do not know any new information ever since we were told to talk to the military and to Malacanang and to the PSG. We have gotten no cooperation whatsoever from any other agency to get to the bottom of this. And let me frame it po, it's not about denying anyone any inoculation. The question has actually become smuggling. There was clearly smuggling of these drugs, and potentially members of the armed forces, potentially members of the PSG were involved in smuggling. We would like to move on as well. FDA would like to move on as well, but can they get any traction in their own investigations? Can they expect cooperation from the military in trying to get to the bottom of the smuggling question?
Well, I want to let the public know that we do not prevent any investigation made by the other agencies. And we submit our unit for investigations if necessary. But of course, we have a commander-in-chief. We have also to follow his guidance, no? He is dual-hatted, the president and the commander-in-chief. So he is our commander. So whatever be his desire, then we have to toe the line.
General, if there's a lot of resistance sa military on the Sinovac shots, willing po ba kayo na mauna kayo just to overcome vaccine hesitancy?
Well, much as I wanted to get the vaccination first, but I have to understand that there are other sectors that direly need more than me. So, tama na yung 25% lang muna, yung mga frontliners natin, at ako naman hindi kasama doon sa frontliners. I am just providing directions and guidance. So, maaring magpahuli na ako. Hintayin ko na lang yung in due time. I will get my share.
Okay. Armed Forces. Lucy, you want to ask a question?
No.
Okay. Well, okay. Armed Forces Chief General Cirilito Sobejana. Sir, maraming salamat po for joining us tonight.
Thank you, General.
Salamat po.
Ma'am Lucy at Ma'am Ami.
Opo, and a snappy salute to you po.
Mag-ingat kayo dahil itong ating invisible enemy, mahirap na kalaban to.
Kayo
Okay.
din po, nasa
Ingat po.
frontline kayo.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We will just go into a break, so please stay with us.
Welcome back to the Chief Zero 1 News. We're now in the final stage of our conversation. Now joining us is Rose Hayahay, teacher and spokesperson of the Save Our Schools Network. Good evening, Ms. Hayahay.
Good evening po sa ating lahat.
Magandang
Tama
gabi
po ba pronunciation ko? Hayahay, Hayahay?
Hayahay po, tama po yun.
Okay.
Hayahay ang
Okay.
buhay.
Let us get your first your narrative. What exactly happened? There's still a lot of confusion, a lot of conflicting narratives. Ano po ang nangyari?
Regarding po dun sa pag-raid no, sa Cebu, sa San Carlos, sa ating mga kapatid na Lumad. So, February 14 pa lang po ay alam na po ng Save Our Schools Network Cebu na may pupunta ng mga parents from Talaingo, Davao del Norte, escorted by the LGU dahil po sa isang Facebook post ng LGU officials. So, ang ginawa po namin no, ay syempre, ang protocols naman po sa mga backlit schools, sa mga Lumad schools ay kapag kukunin ng parents ay iti-turn over ng matiwasay, no, na hindi nagkakasakitan at with presence of our legal counsel. So, February 15, that is Monday, na 2 days ago, ay bigla na lang pong pumunta doon at exactly 11 a.m. in the morning. Pumunta doon ang PNP together with DSWD at ilang mga media without courtesy sa amin, no, sa Save Our Schools Cebu at kahit maging sa San Carlos. So, nung pumunta po sila doon ay nagkagulo na, no? Hinahablot po yung mga bata, nag-iyakan po yung mga bata. Kung nakita niyo po sa mga video na pinalabas, ay nag-iiyakan po sila dahil nga po natatakot sila. No? Kasi yung kasama ng parents nila ay yung sanhi kung bakit nag-backlit. Kasi nga po may mga aerial bombardment na nangyayari sa mga Lumad community. So, nag-iiyakan po sila, nag-Facebook live po yung iba, si Jomar, na isang estudyante, hindi po siya teacher, si Modi na isang estudyante din po at saka si Cirilito, ay si Jomar at saka si Modi po ay sinuntok sinuntok po sila. Tapos napunit po dahil nga nagkagulo na, napunit po yung damit ni Jomar habang si Modi naman po ay sumisigaw po siya na physical distancing po. At yun na nga po, sa mismong araw na din yon ay kinuha na po ang mga bata, lahat ng mga bata at dinitain na ang 7.
If you don't mind, isa lang pong quick background lang. Yung prior to the parents and the police and DSWD coming, gaano katagal na doon yung mga bata?
Nag-start po kami 2019, so almost 2 years na po na nagsistay doon ang mga bata.
So, hindi pa nagko-COVID noon, hindi ba? So,
Yes, po.
ang claim ng pulis ay yung mga magulang ang humingi na makuha na ang kanilang mga anak dahil nga raw 2 taon na halos na nandun sa eskwelahang yon, no? Ano bang ginagawa ron at 2 taon na nandun yung mga bata?
Yeah,
At
so,
yung mga parents ay kinailangang humingi ng tulong sa pulis para lang makuha yung mga anak nila. It doesn't make sense to us, no? It does look like the kids needed saving. So, from your point of view, ano ba talaga nangyari?
ang nangyari po, no, kung bakit nagtagal ng 2 years, no, almost 2 years ang mga bata doon, ay dahil po nag-aaral ang mga bata sa loob ng Lumad Backwood School dahil nga po ay napalayas. If you remember the closure of the Lumad schools, the Salupungan schools, no, galing po ang mga bata doon. At yung claim naman po ng state forces na yung magulang mismo ay may inside Lumad communities, no, may pressure po kasi na nangyayari doon. Meaning, tinatakot po ang mga magulang, no, tinatakot at nako-coerce na makipag-cooperate na lang, no, kaysa naman may mangyaring masama sa kanila.
Miss Hayahay, kasi nagpaalam ba sa magulang? Alam ba nung magulang na nag-aaral yung mga anak nila doon? Kasi nakakapagtaka naman na bakit pupunta sa pulis yung magulang at sasabihin na hindi kailangan nila ng tulong para lang kunin yung anak nila. Hindi ko medyo kakaiba. Kahit may pandemic, hindi naman mangyayari yun eh. It's not an excuse.
Yes.
Naipaalam ba dun sa magulang na ganito nakatagal to? Saka ano yung mga lesson ba dun sa school na yun? Is it a special school or ano ba yun?
Una po ay naipagpaalam po ito sa mga magulang. No? May parent consent po na pinipirmahan ang mga magulang before po pumunta sa Cebu. Ikalawa po ay kung ano yung tinuturo, nagtuturo po kami doon ng agriculture, no, ng math, science, English, at yung kailangan matutunan ng kabataang Lumad para depensahan ang lupang ninuno. Ito yung paano magbasa at paano magsulat. So, alam na alam po ito ng mga magulang kasi ang mga bata natin in almost 2 years ay may minsan kumukontak po sila sa mga parents nila. Bakit po minsan? Kasi far flung area ang Lumad communities. Walang signal, walang kuryente doon. So kapag bumababa ang mga parents nila at bumibili ng bigas or something may binibili, nagkumukontak po yung mga bata. At ang mga bata po na ni-raid, no? Hindi ni-rescue, ni-raid ng state forces ay may mga Facebook po. So,
Teka muna, wala bang summer break yan? Di ba lahat naman ng mga school year, merong mga 2 o 3 buwan na may summer break at pinapauwi mga bata. Pero ito, bakit 2 taon tuloy-tuloy na hindi na nakakasama mga magulang nila? Medyo, that sounds really irregular also, no? You have to admit.
Yes po. Actually po, may summer break po sila. So nag-umpisa po sila doon ng 2019 at uuwi na po sana sila ng 2020 pero nagkaroon po ng pandemya.
Kaya
Hindi po
inabot na.
makakabiyahe dahil po inabot po na lockdown, hindi po nakauwi dahil nga po may COVID-19. At habang may COVID-19, ay patuloy pa rin po yung harassment na nangyayari sa community. Patuloy pa rin po yung fake enforced surrender. Kaya naman, pinagpapatuloy yung pag-aaral. Bilang yung Lumad School naman ay dinesign para sa pag-aaral ng mga bata, ay pinagpatuloy po siya kasi may mga volunteer teachers na kasama doon. Plus, tribal leaders, yung mga elders.
Okay, Rose, atas na ng konti. Yung 6 na magulang na sumama doon sa pagpunta ng mga pulis doon sa Cebu, sila po ba, yung 6 na yun, pumirma din doon sa permit o kasunduan para sila'y bumiyahe papuntang Cebu? Kasi po,
Yes,
kasi po Indian po kasi magiging he said, she said yan. Magiging may paalam ba o hindi, meron bang permiso o hindi na mga magulang, yung kanilang mga bata na pumunta sa Cebu. Sa huli po kasi doon mauuwi yan alam niyo pong ibig sabihin, di ba? Na in the end,
Yes,
you
po.
may baka mamaya yung mga magulang mismo ang magsampa ng kaso. So ano yung panangganan niyo doon?
Yeah, may parent consent po yung mga bata. No? May soft copy at ang hard copy naman po ay kinuha po ng mga police during the raid. At kung ano naman po, we are expecting na talagang gagamitin yung mga parents kasi based sa playbook ng AFP, hindi to first time ng ng Lumad schools na maranasan. Actually, if you remember the Talaingod 18, ganun din to, yung pag-raid sa Haran. So, we are expecting. Pero we are expecting, pero yung mga legal documents, we are preparing din po.
Balikan ko lang yung sinabi mo, no, na prior to the raid, actually handa na kayo, na you were expecting a delegation from the LGUs with the parents. Ano yung konteksto nun? And how long were you already in coordination or aware of this coming delegation?
February 14 po. Yan. One day,
The day before.
ng raid. Actually, hindi po namin alam na by 15 pupunta sila kasi biglaan. Yung expectation namin ay magkakaroon ng usap, no? Matiwasay na usap, no? PNP, DSWD with parents, magiging matiwasay. Pero hindi nga po namin alam na by 15 pupunta sila without courtesy hindi sila nagpaalam sa San Carlos at maging sa amin. At nabalitaan lang po namin ito sa Facebook post ng LGU.
Okay, now we keep saying raid. Pero nung dumating yung police ng February 15, ano ang pakilala nila? Ano ang bungad ng usapan? Did they say na police operation to? Ano yung konteksto nung pagdating nila doon? May warrant ba? Naghingian ba ng warrant? And anong hiningi nyo at anong ipinakita nila?
Yan, wala po silang warrant na pinakita. No? Ang nangyari lang po ay bigla po silang pumasok. No? Walang warrant na pinakita, warrant of arrest, kina Chad, kina Rachel. At yung sumigaw na po yung bata ng physical distancing kasi dumidit-dit na po sila no? Unlike sa kapag nakita mo yung parents mo, no? Kung sa mahabang panahon, syempre matutuwa ka at masasaya ka. Pero hindi po yun ang naging setup. Natakot po yung bata kasi escorted sila ng AFP. At nung pumasok po doon, ay talagang hablutan agad. Hindi po sila napakita ng warrant of arrest.
Okay, para lang malinaw, no? So, are you saying na nag-face-to-face classes kayo doon?
Yes po.
Kasi wala akong alam. Ewan ko pero di ba wala namang nagaganap na face-to-face classes kahit saan? So, paano kayong nag-face-to-face classes? At bakit pinayagan yun?
Okay, so ganito po kasi yung setup, no? May face-to-face at may naka-zoom din. Actually, bakit po nagkakaroon ng face-to-face classes? No, dahil nga po pandemic at bata ipaaral nila. Tapos po, may face-to-face kasi inside Lumad Back to School Cebu, andun din po yung ating volunteer teachers na dinakip at dinampot. So, kaya po may ganung setup. Instead na masayang yung oras ng mga bata, so why not magklase? No? Para may matutunan sila. Habang hinihintay at pinaprocess yung pag-uwi sana nila.
Yung 6 na parents, ilang taon po yung mga anak nila? Anong age ba? What are we talking about here?
Minors po yung mga anak nila.
Meaning, gaano ka bata yun?
14 to 16 po ata.
14 to 16.
Yeah.
Tapos nung nagkita sila, sinabi nyo, nagsigawan, naghilahan?
Yes po.
Yung parents and the children?
Yes po.
Bakit ayaw sumama ng mga bata? Ayaw sumama ng mga bata sa magulang nila? Ganun ba yun?
Yan. Gusto pong sumama ng mga bata, pero may pero lang po. Kasi escorted sila ng AFP. Tapos yung mga bata, double displaced and emotional torture na po yan sa nangyayari inside Lumad communities. Ang mga batang yon ay galing sa Talaing, Davao del Norte. In experience ng salupungan schools, no, sa Nasilaban, Talaing, Davao del Norte, habang nagkaklase kami, ay pinagbabaril po kami doon, habang nagkaklase. So, ang mga bata na andun ay na-testify po nila kung gaano itrato ng state forces yung mga lumad, yung mga nag-aaral. Kaya naman, nung pumasok na, natakot na po, no? Nagsigawan na. At yun nga pong nakikiusap kami, di ba? Physical distancing po. Mag-uusap po tayo ng matiwasay. Pero ang nangyari, yun na, pinablot ang cellphone, no? Kung makita niyo po sa videos, talagang binuhat yung bata, pinusasan ang mga dati, pinusasan ang aming mga kabataan.
Ms. Rose, I have one more question eh. In between ng 2019 at hanggang 2021, kasi 2019 nga, di ba, sila lumakad papuntang Cebu. At sabi nga ninyo, may paalam naman sila mula sa mga magulang. Sa pagitan ng 2 taon na yun ba, may paramdam o may sinabi ba yung mga magulang na binabawi na nila yung paalam na binigay nila para sa mga bata na manatili sa Cebu? Was there any time when they said ibalik na yung mga bata dito sa Davao? Sorry,
Wala po.
sa Caraga.
Yes po, wala po. Sa Talaingod po, yung place ng parents na pumunta, wala po silang sinasabing pinaabot sa amin na kukunin na yung bata, gusto na nilang makita, wala pong ganun.
So ang sinasabi mo, at no time at all nagparamdam yung mga magulang na ibalik na ninyo yung mga bata. Yun ang sinasabi mo?
Yes po. Yes po.
Okay. Sige. Well, maraming salamat, Ms. Rose Hayahay, guro at tagapagsalta ng Save Our Schools Network. Thank you for joining us and have a good time.
Thank you po.
Maraming salamat po.
Ingat po.
Thank you po.
And that'll be all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope that this discussion will keep the conversation going. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News.